Do you want to improve your gameplay in Dungeons & Dragons? Well, just follow these 5 simple tips. Hey folks, I'm Alex Story, and welcome back to The Fire, where I talk about Dungeons & Dragons, DM tips, player tips, and just general things that I like to talk about. And today, we're going to be talking about how to improve your gameplay as a player. And I guess to do that, we first have to answer the question, what does it mean to be a better player? And I guess there's really 2 ways you can look at it. There's the mechanical aspect, which is knowing how to play your character, right? Like knowing your class really well, knowing your race really well, picking the best spells, hitting for the most damage, using the right ability scores, like picking the right ones. And that's important to know, but it's not really what we're going to be focusing on today. We're going to be focusing on the other part of being a better player, which is the social part. How do I show up to my games and play my character to the best of my ability to where the other people at the table are looking at me and saying, wow, I want to play with him because he knows what he's talking about. Or like, yeah, no, he's really social. I love the way he plays the character. And, you know, you don't want to make sure you're rubbing people the wrong way or taking the wrong social cues in certain situations. So I guess without beating around the bush, let me jump into the first tip that I've discovered to be a better player. And that is just know what your characters can do. And that doesn't mean having every single rule memorized. You don't need to know all the classes, all the subclasses, every single like gold and weight cost for every single item. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is just knowing your class, knowing all the different things that you can do as a class, and if you're a spellcaster, knowing the spells that are available to you, taking time to prepare those spells, and then knowing what those spells do. That's really all you need to do, because that's the beauty of being a player character versus a dungeon master, is you can really just put all your effort into that one character and how that character interacts with the party. So yeah, just take time, look at your class in the player's handbook, look at your background, look at your race, and then know what those different abilities that you have do. Know what rage does. Know if it takes an action or a bonus action to shift into your wild shape if you're a druid, depending on your circle. Know, you know, if you have different spells, know what they do. That way, if you're in the middle of combat, you're not necessarily pulling from the immersion because, like, hold up, wait a second here. What does this do again? Because if you have that, you know, memorized or at least close in hand, then you can keep moving and play effectively, and you know give other folks a chance to kind of get through that combat too. You'll also be able to more effectively roleplay a competent hero if you know what they can do, because then you're like, oh yeah, totally I can do that, and you can slip those elements into those social interactions if you're having like a role-playing moment. So the next tip I have is playing with integrity, because it can be tempting sometimes to cheat, right? Maybe your DM is busy focusing on other aspects of the game, and they already have a million things to remember. And, you know, maybe they didn't notice that, hey, you just took like 30 damage, and you should have rolled a concentration check to hold your spell. And you might be tempted to not mention it. But, you know, you want to make sure that you're being honest, you're playing with integrity, and you alert the DM that, hey, you know what? Oh, I forgot to roll my concentration check. That helps you in the long run and keeps you from getting like a bad taste in your mouth later on if you do have a victory, because you're like, wow, I only won because I cheated. You're kind of you're not earning your victories. So be honest about what you rolled. So if you rolled a nat 1 when you really wanted to hit that monster with your giant axe or whatever, just say, hey, you know what? I rolled a 1, and just move on from there. You'll have plenty of times to roll again, and the dice tend to even out. Don't conveniently forget about concentration checks. They'll be like, whoops, I forgot to roll a concentration, you know. Also mark down the resources that you use. If you've used a lot of ammunition or many spell slots or like your rage or your key points or other resources, make sure you mark that down, you know, because those are finite resources. And people will start to notice too and kind of look down on you if you've used your inspiration 5 times since the last time your DM has given it to you. Another way to play with integrity is by making sure that if there is a ruling on something that maybe you don't agree with, or that, you know, you turned out that you were wrong about a rule, just to, you know, kind of own it, right? If there's a ruling on it, don't really get too angry at it in the moment. And this goes the other way around too. Like, let's say you know for a fact that you were right about a particular rule and the DM is wrong, right? Like, you know that your spell could have done that thing and the DM is saying, no, that's not how it works. but you know it does. You read the book. It's right there in black and white in front of you. And rather than getting upset in the moment and calling out the DM in front of the table and embarrassing them, just table it for now. That's a way to play with integrity. If there is a ruling you don't agree with, you don't necessarily need to embarrass people in front of other people, because all that's going to do is make them defensive, and they're just going to double down on whatever ruling they made, and it's just going to get awkward, right? So make sure that you just table that, and then if there's a break, talk to your DM about, like, hey, you know what, I don't think that's how that rule works. You know, you can have that side conversation, but especially in front of other people, like, keep those confrontations to a minimum, and you have time to kind of figure that out later. If you're playing virtually or digitally or whatever, you can also leverage private messages to kind of call things out too, to your DM or other players. That way you're not like kind of seeing it out in the open. So like, let's say, you know, you noticed another player forgot to do their concentration check. Like, hey man, don't forget your concentration check. Or maybe they forgot they had bless. You know, you can be like, hey, you know, don't forget that you have bless, or you have your bardic inspiration. You can do those private messages instead of like calling people out in front of the table. The next tip I have is sharing the spotlights. What does that mean? That means giving other players and player characters moments where their skills, their backstory, their prowess can be highlighted. And this is awesome and a rewarding way to play. You know, you get to kind of see people shine, and you'll get a kick out of it after a while by seeing other players kind of, you know, come into their own because you kind of alley-oop them, as it were. And honestly, it can lead to some awesome in-game roleplay character moments too. So here are some examples on how sharing the spotlight could work. Let's say you're playing and you guys go to a town. The local duchess is like trying to get heroes, like take this quest to kill the dragon, but like no one, she doesn't take anybody. You kind of have to convince her. Rather than saying, oh, I'd like to do my persuasion check on the duchess to make sure we can do this quest, you can point over to your barbarian and be like, hey, you know, Ragnarok over here, he has slain hundreds. You should see how strong he is, how he wields his battle axe. He's a fury to behold, and that gives Ragnarok over here a chance to kind of, you know, maybe engage with NPC, talk to them, and talk about all the different feats that he's done. That's a way to kind of highlight a player. You can also, let's say, like you're sitting at the fire before taking a long rest, just ask another player character in game to tell the rest of the party more about themselves. Kind of draw from their backstory. To that end, also make sure that you're engaging with your Dungeon Master's world. Your Dungeon Master has invested a lot of time and effort into creating a homebrew world, or if they're using a book, taking a pre-written adventure and making it come to life. And you know, you should engage with that world. Talk to the non-player characters. Interact with the objects in the world. Like, just try to pull that lore. Go to local library and research things, you know. Explore that world. Engage with it. Don't just kind of sit there like you're on like a carnival ride, or better yet would be like a Disney tour boat or something, right? You can actually get out of the boat and interact with them. You don't have to just wait until the Dungeon Master takes you from scene to scene. So that will spark conversations. That'll spark role play scenarios, and that'll give the Dungeon Master and the other players something to kind of piggyback it off of. So engage with your world. If you want to be a better player, engage with the world around you in Dungeons & Dragons. My last tip is to be considerate. You know, we're all playing Dungeons & Dragons to tell stories and to escape to another world for multiple hours. So we want to make sure that we're using that time to the best of its ability, and we're not wasting it. So to be considerate, just follow these simple rules. So the first simple rule is just to be on time to your Dungeons & Dragons sessions. It's super important to be on time, because when you're not on time to the Dungeon Dragon session, the rest of your party is just sitting there waiting for you, and chances are you're a group of adults, you have lives, you have work, and you might have families, and every minute counts. And this time that this group of people set aside to play Dungeons & Dragons, every moment you're not playing Dungeons & Dragons, you're kind of wasting probably your friends' time by not being there. And obviously, right, if there's an emergency, people are going to forgive you for it. But if it's just like something, oh, I forgot, or I forgot to like leave early enough, just make sure that doesn't happen, right? Be on time to your sessions. People are going to love you for it. It's such a small thing, and it means a lot, and you don't rub people the wrong way. Listen and stay engaged. So this is another one, especially when you're playing virtually using like Roll20, is people will tab out, they'll be on their phones, they'll just not engage with the game that they're playing. So try to limit your distractions. If you can, play in a darker room maybe, so you're not looking around if you're playing digitally. Otherwise, put your phone on silent. If you're using D&D Beyond or something, maybe just turn off notifications for things other than D&D Beyond. Because, yeah, you're going to get distracted, you're going to lose your place, you're going to get stuck, and you're not going to be as immersed in the moment, and it might harm other people's gameplay. So make sure that you're listening and staying engaged. And that kind of comes up here, just be ready on your turn. So especially in combat, the more people there are, the longer combats take, and it takes even longer if you do not have your turn ready. So just know, look at that initiative tracker if your DM is using one, know when you're coming up, and just have your turn ready. I mean, obviously things change. Maybe the person in front of you did something crazy, right? But have a couple options ready. Like, hey, I'm gonna hit this person with my sword, or if something happens, maybe I'll use this spell, right? Just have a couple different options. That way you can get right into it and not take 10-minute turns. So just be ready on your turn. Another tip to be considerate is just don't gatekeep, folks, right? I know this is one of those hobbies where you're kind of, the longer you play, the better you are at the game. That's just you know more rules, you've played enough characters so you know kind of what's effective and what isn't, and you might scoff at the decisions of others, especially newer players. Just don't do that. Just forgive new players if they make mistakes or if they're making suboptimal decisions. Don't try to say that, hey, this is too advanced for you, you can't play the wizard because you're a new player. Don't do that. Be considerate and be helpful, right? Offer help, like, hey, do you want me to help you pick your spells, or do you have any questions? But do not gatekeep, folks. That's just not a way to be a better player. It's not a way for other players to look at you and say, you know what, I love playing with that person, because, you're actively dismissing them just because they're a new player, right? But yeah, that's my 5 rules for being a better player, which is know what your character can do, play with integrity, share the spotlight, engage with the world, and be considerate. So if you follow those 5 rules, I guarantee that your friends, that the people in your party, in your D&D group, they're going to look at you and they're going to love every single moment that they get to play with you. So, and yeah, your DMs will too. So yeah, I hope you liked the video. If you did, go ahead and hit the like button, and please consider subscribing. And if you want to go the extra mile, check out my Patreon, patreon.com/dungeonfire, and become a patron, where, folks get exclusive content every month, as well as exclusive looks in how I make these videos. But anyway, bye for now. Peace.